Okay, welcome everybody. Happy Tuesday. Thanks so much for joining us. My name is Loretta Cohen. I'm with Westchester Communities That Care. We partner each year with Westchester Area School District to bring you the speaker series. I will introduce our speaker in just a minute. I wanted to real quick just let you know, next up after tonight, we have a presentation in October called Talk Now, Know How. It reviews some local data that we have from kids right here in Westchester. It talks about how to have conversations with difficult topics like substance use and youth mental health. So join us for that. Also, one of our projects that we get most excited about every year is our Thrive projects that we do with area youth. We work with them to understand that same data that we're going to talk about next month. We teach them basic marketing skills and help them create their own public health campaigns. So we are most happy when we are able to get their work out in the public eye. The top picture is one they put in the high school playbills last spring. The summer before that, we had a group of kids who created a ad that we were able to put on a transit shelter right in front of the Wawa on Route 3. So we love being able to do that. If you would like to help support us do any of that work, we have the kids created these amazing t-shirts. You've got choices, and these are all the great things you can do that will help you thrive. You can buy a shirt or a pack of shirts to help us give some away to kids who might not be able to purchase their own. You can do that on our website at wcctc.org/shop. The other ways we would love to have families be involved and engaged. We have a coalition meeting coming up on October 10th that is open to anyone if you're available at 1 p.m. on a Thursday. And then we also have volunteer liaisons from each of our 17 local schools. Well, we don't have one from every school, but that's our goal. So if you think you might be interested in helping us help kids thrive, please reach out to me. I will put my email address in the chat, and I would love to hear from folks. So our parent speaker series, I want to just real quick, I will stop sharing my screen so our presenter can get her information up there. And I will introduce you to her. Dr. Janet Edgett is nationally renowned for her work as a therapist with teenagers, kids, and families. Her approach is consistent with her belief that respect, accountability, and prudent transparency, I love the use of that adjective, are the cornerstones to healthy, enduring relationships. So she's the author of 7 books. Tonight, she is here tonight to talk to us about finding balance among the many hats we wear as parents. I also want to give a big shout out and a thank you to Embark Behavioral Health. No affiliation with Janet that I'm aware of, but they are the sponsor for our event tonight. So thank you so much, Dr. Edgett. Welcome. Can't wait to hear your presentation.
Thank you so much, Loretta. Thank you. I am delighted to be here. Welcome, everyone. I love talking with parents about adolescence. It's a major area of interest of mine, and I really appreciate the opportunity to have this audience and talk with them about parenting teenagers in the 2020s. As a psychologist who specializes in seeing children and adolescents, and as a parent of 3 young men who I raised here in this area in Chester Springs, I can really appreciate the challenges that people face raising their kids. My boys are about a half a generation older than your children are now about. And already there's such a tremendous difference between the time when they grew up, which was in the 2000s, and or the aughts, as people say, and the climate today. I mean, today it's just much more hurried. It's more tech driven. It's almost more impersonal. It's ultra competitive, and I see a lot of people who lack a sense of personal accountability, don't have the social graces that I think many of us would like to see. And so, yeah, so it's different. You know, my kids also say that they're really grateful that they weren't born recently, that they were born back when they were. because that was before tech really kicked in. I mean, the iPhone was released like in 2007. And yeah, they were teenagers then, but I think it still took a couple of years before the whole tech stuff took on a life of its own. And you have, Snap and Instagram and all that, where kids are just consumed by that. And, I'm grateful too, because I see parents just pulling their hair out, feeling so helpless in the face of their kids' addiction really to electronics, and having to watch as their kids' brains just melt, as far as I'm concerned. I mean, kids don't know they don't miss what they don't know. So we can talk to them all we want about, what it's like to enjoy reading, to enjoy going outside, to enjoy this, but they never had it. They don't miss it. So when we talk to them, they, get glazed eyes, and it's like, there you go again, talking about the good old days. So we have to do it a different way. So that's a half a generation. So looking at a full generation, from when we grew up to where kids are growing up today, tremendous differences. I mean, I'm not saying anything really novel, but I wanted to underscore the point, because I hear a lot of parents still saying, I was a teenager too once, I was a teenager too once. And I just want to say, it's so different now. You really don't want to say that. Don't say that, because it's not going to land well. And I don't know, it's just not going to, it's not going to indicate that kind of what's going on for kids. So let's just bury that one. Okay, so all these changes, a lot of them are welcomed. I mean, I think some of the embracing of mental health among youth is certainly welcomed, as is the national dialogue that kids have started about mental health. They now have the voice and they have the knowledge to ask for help when they need it, and also for how to go about getting it. Parents have a better understanding of the mental health needs of their kids and are more sensitive to all that. So all these are good changes, but other changes in the last couple of decades are not so welcomed. Okay, the explosive growth of social media, of course, and its ubiquitous presence in our kids' lives is just devastatingly consequential. Jonathan Haidt has written a great book, The Anxious Generation. It's all the rage now, about the impact of all this electronics and everything on the mental health of our teenagers. But I think of it, there's so many ways that it's affected our kids and the relationships they have with other people. But I come back to the curiosity, the creativity, and the imagination that we grew up with, playing outside, are three things that are not really being exercised. And that kills me, that kids grow up without curiosity. So it's kind of like they don't have an interest in expanding their world, because everything they have is kind of right here, and they don't know that there's this exciting world out there. We tell them, and again, they get glazed eyes. And it's just, I'm not going to talk about tech the whole time, but that is just an enormous problem. I think also the popularity of social media creates this place where kids are very judgmental with each other, and there's a lot of criticism. And so we have kids who are kind of drawing their boundaries in, for lack of a better term. They become smaller people because they don't want to be out there. They don't want to be out there in their full, colorful personalities. And, we get kids with a lot of social anxiety now. And I think some of it comes by virtue of their neurophysiology. I think a lot of it is secondary to the culture, where if you do one thing out of place, one thing wrong, all of a sudden you're marginalized from your own social group. And it steals the confidence and the moxie of our kids and their interest in doing kind of off the grid activities. Certain activities, okay, soccer and football and baseball and those, basketball. Others are not. I have had kids in middle school who give up dancing, who give up gymnastics, who give up things that you wouldn't think would be controversial. But in the words of one girl, she just said, it'll mark me as a loser if I'm still doing gymnastics in 7th grade. That's pretty sad. Okay, and then there's all the weed kids getting high before school and after school and during school and when they're with friends, when they're alone. Some are just self-medicating. Some are doing it because they're bored and they don't know how to create a more interesting, stimulating environment around themselves. Others are just wanting to escape the stress in their lives for a little bit. And they're not even, it makes them complacent. It makes them dull. It takes a mental edge. Kids who are unhappy in their lives, if they smoke a lot, and then they realize they're not happy, but they don't really care to do anything about it because they don't have the motivation or the energy to think about it. Um, Parents know all about it, can't do anything about it, can't do much about it. There are things you could do, but the overall feeling is like, oh my gosh, these kids are just doing all this stuff, and we're on the sidelines watching, feeling somewhat helpless. COVID pandemic made everything worse. Mental health, education was another casualty with COVID, but there was another one too that is getting a lot of attention. I think it's important. The sense of security that kids feel growing up, sense of security and faith, measure of faith in the people who are raising them and shepherding this world into the future. Teenagers, younger kids look into the future now. They see an adulthood that has become less and less appealing. It looks fraught with tensions and stressors and taxes and unwelcome responsibilities and unrelenting stress and conflict. I have kids saying, how do you find it? How do you pick a bank? Like, how do you even do that? It's just become so anxiety inducing for them. And they say, you know what? Thanks, but no. I'm just going to try and extend my youth for as long as I can because I don't like what's coming ahead. That makes me really sad that there isn't that feeling of, I can't wait to get there. I can't wait to see what I've become and what I'm going to do. And then there's the whole climate thing with kids thinking, is there even going to be a viable planet left? And will I even want to have kids of my own? So I'm not trying to create a dark picture here, but these are the things that our kids are struggling with. Many of which we know about, but you put it all together and it's like, wow, no wonder why they really struggle. But it's not just them. It also has made the challenges of parenting very difficult as well. It's not made it any easier for people to parent than it has made kids for them to grow up at all. So what are some of these challenges? Okay. There's a crisis, I think, in confidence and credibility among many American parents. Think about it. The task of, just maintaining a sense of authority and credibility in the eyes of our kids who've grown very, judgmental. You have this whole empowering of the youth culture, which didn't used to be the case, but there's sort of an idealization of youth culture. It's integrated into mainstream culture, and that has changed the dynamic between parents and their kids, because it's almost like you start to wonder, well, kids talk as if they know better. Maybe they do. And so parents can easily doubt themselves. I think also the teenagers and younger preteens, appropriation of electronics and marginalization of parents, it's almost like you use it as a shield, has also made it really hard for parents to feel confident in their decisions, that especially the ones that their kids are not going to be very fond of. Okay. In the wake of all these changes, I think a lot of parents find that, and this is what I hear in my office too, find themselves second guessing decisions about everything, from curfews to screen time to how disrespectful is too disrespectful. I mean, I've seen kids be so disrespectful, it makes my jaws drop. It's like, wow, how do you say that as if you're just telling your parent like what you had for breakfast? It's like very, very comfortable with it. That's a whole other problem. Wondering what's normal now, what's not normal, what are the new red flags? Are chores, are the chores that I try to make my daughter do really going to make her depression worse, as she says? And kids have really gotten very effective at getting parents to cease and desist with all the requests to just kind of be, good people around the house and share responsibility. So let's look at some of these other challenges. And again, these have to do with balance. The whole talk is going to be looked at through the lens of balancing seemingly contradictory parenting tasks that are not contradictory, but sometimes they're enacted that way because it's hard to find that sweet spot. Okay. I'm going to talk for, maybe 45 minutes, and then open it up to questions. So if you have questions, you could put them in the chat or you could just ask them later. I welcome, I like that part of the talk very much. So no wonder why there's difficulty figuring out how much helping and supporting is enough before it becomes enabling, or how much empathy is enough before it starts absolving kids of responsibility. How long do I tolerate disrespectful behavior before saying enough? Or is this the new normal for typical teen behavior? Is this to be expected? Am I supposed to wait longer for my kid to, get the hang of things, or should I wait longer to put the kibosh on rude behavior, especially if my kid's having a mental health issue or has a learning disorder or is depressed? Does that change what I ask of them? How do we express compassion for stressful or traumatic experiences our kids go through while not allowing them to use that as an excuse to behave badly, okay, or to mistreat people, or, to talk, disrespectfully to them? And then the last one, how do we balance our encouragement or even our kind of cheerleading of expressions of talent or interest that we see in our kids with the need to sometimes check things that get out of control, like a really good athlete who becomes really competitive, gets a lot of praise from coaches and adults and kids and brothers and adulation and all that stuff, and starts to get a little extra competitive, gets competitive, not just on the field, gets competitive at home or gets insubordinate to coaches. And we need to check some of that. And how do we dissuade them from acting in a certain way without demoralizing them? Okay, so these are some of the questions that I hear in my office that people are struggling with. So enough with the questions. Let's look at some of the answers and see what we got. So this next, section, so to speak, is about balancing our compassion and support for our kids while also holding them accountable for the choices they make and the impact of those choices on the people around them. Okay. And I think of this as kind of an umbrella phrase for the balancing act that we'll be talking about in all those specific examples I mentioned before. They can all kind of be examined through this lens. Here's a point I want to make. I alluded to it before. As long as we approach this issue from an angle of, I have to pick one or the other, I can be empathic or I can hold them accountable, it's going to remain a conundrum. The thing is that we can find the balance where we're doing both. We are expressing compassion while at the same time asking for good behavior or responsibility or accountability. We can do both. And when you're able to demonstrate support or compassion like that, while at the same time setting limits or deterring behavior or holding kids accountable, that's the sweet spot. That's a sweet spot right there. So let's say we have a kid, 15, 16 years old, okay? Excellent student, excellent athlete, looks great on paper, okay? One of those kids looks great on paper. But he's really stressed about school and very stressed about grades and very stressed about college apps and very stressed about getting recruited to play in college and stressed about everything. And so he starts snapping at everyone at home, and he starts being mean to his younger brother, and he starts being disrespectful to his dad. And often enough, parents let it go because they're thinking, well, he's having a tough time. They feel bad for him. They don't know what else to do to ease. They let him sort of stress on the family. And they say to the younger brother, oh, your older brother, he doesn't mean it. He's just really stressed. Let it go, so on and so forth. So the question is, how much empathy is enough before it absolves kids of responsibility? You never have too much empathy. The problem is not enough accountability. So it's never a problem of being too empathic. It's just you got to hold the other end. Like, I feel for you. I see what you're going through. I know it's awful. I'll help you in any way you can. But you can't walk around the house demeaning your little brother or being disrespectful to the rest of us. And that's what I would encourage parents to be saying. I know, because you don't want your kid going out into the world thinking that's the right template, that it's okay to mistreat people who care about you using the excuse that, look, I'm having a hard time, or you know how stressed I am, or you know I'm worried about grades, or la, 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 because it's a poison in the family. It creates resentment, sibling resentment, parent resentment, and it doesn't teach the kid to self-regulate in a way that's going to serve them when they're with other people, because the rest of the world isn't going to give a you know what about how stressed they are. They're going to want to be treated decently. So the right place to start that, of course, is at home. People outside the home aren't going to be as nice about it when they correct them. Parents can be a lot nicer. But I do think that a parent can say, listen, I know you're really having a hard time, but I don't like the way you're acting around the house. And I think you're taking advantage of the fact that we feel bad for you. And I'm realizing that I could feel bad for you without having to lower the bar on what I expect and what we expect of you around the house. And what it involves for the parent, it's almost like you're going to have to be grossly inconvenienced, because when you say that to your kid, and you say, that's not okay to do that anymore. It's not okay. I will help you. If you could think of ways that I can help you reduce your stress that are appropriate, I'm there. I got you. But you can't do this anymore. And so what it means is that, if you hear, let's say, the older kid saying something to the younger brother, you don't just let it, you stop it. You say, whoa, that's what I was talking about. No more. Like, we're not doing that anymore. Or find a different way to tell your brother you need to get on the computer. Find a different way to do it, or find a different way to ask your dad or ask me that question. And it means getting on it all the time, which is really inconvenient, because sometimes you're in the middle of something, or sometimes you've had enough and it's been a long day. But, where you say something like, I don't know, like, well, sometimes it's like, well, what if the kid continues to do it? Well, there have to be consequences, but it doesn't always have to be like, give me your phone. It could be, you know what? That was really unkind thing to say to your brother. So I'm going to ask you to do his chores today. They're yours, just for the day. Okay? Or hold them accountable in the moment by saying, of all the things that you could have said to your brother after he lost his game, you chose that. And then you're silent. But the older brother's looking at you like uncomfortable, because usually you just say, don't talk to your brother like that. Don't say that. That's not nice. But you're saying, of all the things you could say, you chose that. And then there's silence, and then they're uncomfortable, and it just disincentivizes their mean comment for the future. And that's really what I'm talking about, is finding this balance. So here's another example. Here's, say, a girl who's 15, right? Her parents want to raise her to have a voice, self-advocacy. Okay. Maybe the mom grew up in a family where girls weren't allowed to have voices, or she grew up in a culture or a place where maybe just she herself was very shy, didn't feel comfortable speaking up for herself. She let people take advantage of her, and she knew when she had kids, she wasn't going to allow her daughter to become like that. Okay. So she endorses her daughter's rather domineering, bossy personality and overbearing voice. Okay. The mom might say, well, you know what? Because this is what we'll say to me. She's strong-willed, Janet. You know what? She speaks her mind, and she takes care of herself, and she's no pushover. And I like that about her. And I'm thinking, I bet you do, but do others like that about her? Because it's not just about her. We all want to raise kids who have a voice and can advocate for themselves. And we encourage that. But I think there's a tremendous difference between a voice of agency and advocacy and a voice of righteousness. And this girl was more on the righteousness side. And when you speak that way, you don't get people on your side. You don't get people to join you. You don't get people to want to see your point of view or your perspective, because it's just really off-putting. And so maybe that mom needs to stop and intervene and say something, you know what? I don't like the way you were talking to your little sister tonight. You were kind of judgy, and I thought you talked down to her. Look, I love your ambition, and I love your confidence, and I love the way you can advocate for yourself. But I don't love the permission that you give yourself to push others out of your way. I don't love that. And I'd really like you to be mindful of that as we go forward, blah, 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 right? There's your sweet spot. And it's kind of, it's just an example of endorsing or supporting a tendency or a quality or a trait or a skill in your kid, while putting up some guardrails at the same time. Often I see the first part, I don't see the latter part. And so the kid is endorsed, and then they become maybe a little too entitled, maybe a little too bossy. Um, and they have very little awareness that the way in which they're trying to get people to join them isn't really effective. Okay. So, all right. So let me move on, because if doing that were so easy, we'd all be doing it. But it's not easy. I think, first of all, we don't, I think parents are really good at talking about the business of parenting, the business of parenting. And, what time do I pick you up? And did you bring the permission slip home? And have you started, your intern, if you started looking for an internship yet? I think that makes it hard to talk in this other way. I also think it's not modeled anywhere. Our parents of our generation didn't really talk like this. And so it's a new way of talking. It's a very candid way. It's a very warm way, but it's a very intentional way of saying, this is what I want to say to you. I love this. I felt bad for you. I used to let you do this because of that. They're two separate things. And when they get glommed together is when we start to have problems. So what are some other reasons why parents might have trouble insisting on accountability? Well, okay, worrying about overburdening, overstressing their kid with responsibilities. And then kid pushes back, I'm having a hard time. Okay, makes sense. Some people have trouble just establishing boundaries or following through on consequences that matter. It's another one. Other kids are very, very easily manipulated, or put on the defensive by their kid. And the kid gets them to cease and desist. So you have a kid who says, seriously, I'm going through like the worst time of my life, and you're upset because I didn't come down to say goodbye to grandma. Okay. A lot of parents will be, look, I just thought you would have liked to hear that, but I would take it further. I would say, I know you're going through the worst time of your life. You tell us every day, and I will help you with that. I've offered all these different ways, and I will continue to do that. But it's not a good enough reason for you to be rude for somebody who loves you and cares about you. So yeah, the next time she's here, I do expect you to come down and find a way to show up and say goodbye to grandma. I do expect you to do that. Just saying that. And that's it. And you leave it. There's no big lecture. It's just that. That's that sweet spot again. Other reasons, dismissing, this is a big one. Exhausted. Just like I've had enough. And I think we've all been there. I remember, I was a single parent. I was a very single parent. And there were times when I'd come home, from the office, and I'd have, like a zillion calls to return and emails. And I would see my boys, and they're supposed to be maybe doing their homework, and they're on, I don't know, playing games or something. And I just pretended not to see it because I couldn't deal with it. I just I just went upstairs. So I know what it's like to just be too tired to deal with it. Okay. Other times, parents, their life choices, if they feel made their kids' lives harder, okay, maybe a divorce has caused the family to move a lot, or, change schools a lot. And so they're a little too ready to overlook bad behavior or bail their kid out of situations. And this is another one that's a huge one. Often parents will dismiss the kids' poor behavior or moodiness or snapping or whatever it is as just typical teen angst or typical teen behavior. Now, we have this narrative in our culture, American cultural narrative about adolescence, okay, which I think is so destructive. It's been alive for decades. And it says that, when kids become teenagers or a little bit before, they all of a sudden become unrecognizably irascible, irresponsible, moody, self-absorbed, blah, 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 blah. All this because of puberty, because of hormones, because of their brain, because of this and all that stuff. And all these beliefs that are not true, they travel as truths. And they skew the expectation, they skew the expectations we have of our adolescent down. They skew our view of teenagers in a downward direction. Okay. Now, yes, there are changes associated with adolescence. There are brain changes that drive the emergence of new qualities in a person. For instance, novelty, a search for novelty, search for the company of peers, emotional intensity for sure, creative exploration, a little risk-taking behavior, impulsivity. That's all true. Okay. This is the work largely of neuropsychiatrist Dan Siegel. He's written terrific books about it. So you could see how some of these things might be expressed in teenagers. But how much do they really account for some of the disrespectful or frankly aggressive behavior we see in teenagers? Very, very little. Very little. And these have become fused together and put in a big draw that's just normalizes typical teen behavior. And this is a great problem. Saying that your teenager can't control his aggressive temper or his mouth because he's still maturing or his hormones are raging or whatever. It's a very different conversation than the one Dan Siegel is having about kids who experience an emotional intensity. That's an intensity. It doesn't mean they become disrespectful. Maybe they get riskier and all that, but it's not aggressive. So a kid may be impulsive. They may be dysregulated. They may plan poorly. But that's a very different kid or a very different behavior from a kid who walks over to his younger brother who's rummaging through the refrigerator and shoves him to the side because he wants to assert his dominance. Okay. Or a girl who says F you to her mom when her mom asks for her phone. That's not adolescence. That's just bad behavior. It's not adolescence. And unfortunately, it's gotten sort of normalized as such. And I don't know. I just feel very strongly that adolescents get a bad rap that way. In the sense that they get sort of glomped together as these kids who do these, all these things. And they're really, really, really nice people. And they're really are by nature very empathic and can be very responsible. It's just we expect less of them. And so, of course, they do less. If you believe your kids can't help it, then you're not going to ask for it. And so a lot of people don't. Okay. Let me take a moment to talk a little bit about distinguishing between helping and enabling, how to find that sweet spot. Okay. Sometimes, okay, here's the dilemma. You want to protect, you want to, I don't know, parents have a natural inclination to protect your teenager, protect them from overstress, from anguish, from angst, with the need for them to learn how to handle frustration, failure, criticism, anxiety, the things that will bring them discomfort and angst. And so what's enough, what's too much? Okay. It's hard to know how much is too much. It's even harder to know if the kid has mental health issues or if there are learning challenges and you wonder like, okay, how will I know how hard to push? What if she says she can't? Maybe she can't. Is she fooling me? I don't know. Am I letting him off the hook too easily? She says I'm unfair. Am I? And all this stuff can easily skew the parenting in favor of enabling. And then you get something like this, okay? Which I love this cartoon because it's happening. I mean, it happens. It happens. There's a link at the end of the handouts, at the end of the slide deck, which you will or should be able to get a copy of. There's a link to an article, What's Helping, What's Enabling, and it just goes into more detail about these things that I'm talking about now in terms of discerning. Yeah, that one. Nobody wins when over-accommodation is confused with compassion. Okay, and that's often what I see happening. Okay, so parents help when they provide the support that a kid needs, okay, in order to do something. Write thank you notes or making sure there's printer paper for a project. And what would that look like? That would look like telling your kid, listen, remember to plan ahead. You have that project, you're going to have to print it out. Make sure we have printer paper 2 days at least before. So if we don't, you have time to tell me and I have time to get to the store. I'm not going to do it Thursday night at 11 p.m. Not happening this time. We've done it too many times that way. Okay. Demonstrating faith in the kid's ability to manage the frustration they might feel and supporting them. So, for instance, if a kid has a lot of anxiety and they need to talk to an adult or a teacher or a job interview, then maybe you help by doing role play or you help by writing a script out that they can follow, but you don't do it for them, okay? And remaining warm, accessible while they're trying to figure this out, and also holding them to a certain standard. So if they are dealing with some pressures and they're sulking around the house or blaming others, that's where you stop. You say, I know this is hard for you. I will help you. I'll go into the store. If this causes you, I'll go into the store with you. I'm not going to do the transaction. I'll stand with you. I'll do that. But sulking around the house and blaming people is not going to help. I don't want to see that, making that distinction. Parents enable. I mean, there's a lot of different ways, and the handout has more examples, but I'm just covering a few. When they're doing something for your teenager that the teen says she can't do it herself, but she needs to begin learning how. Okay. Driving is a big one. I see kids are going off to college. They haven't learned to drive because it's easy. They get their parents and their friends to drive for them. Okay. Another one would be, here's one from my parent. Okay. Me, I'm saying to a parent, why are you making all these phone calls for your 19-year-old daughter and setting up these appointments for her? And the mom says, well, because if I don't do it, then she won't call. And I say, well, how about if you hold off on making appointments for things that matter more to her than you, the appointments that she really wants. Hold off on those and just make the other ones that are really important that she's probably not going to make, like maybe the dentist follow-up. But the other ones are for hers, because if it matters enough to her, she's going to wrestle with that anxiety more so than if you're able to take that anxiety away from her. Another way that you might be enabling is if you lower the standards so that the teen or the child makes the grade. Okay. So rabbits are, I don't know, everyone's getting rabbits these days, or rabbits are just the in pet. So I'm talking to, a mom of a girl who's doing a terrible job of cleaning the rabbit cage for which she's responsible. The mom says she just, she's feeding them and she's kind of cleaning out the cage, but she just does a terrible job. So I say to her, well, but you don't send her back to do a better job? And the mom says, oh, we'd be at it all day. Okay. And she said, my daughter would just say, it's fine, it's good enough. And I'd say, it's not good enough. And we go back and forth. So I just go back later after she goes to bed and I finish it. At least she's doing a little bit of it. Okay. That's enabling. What helping would be saying to the daughter, you petition for these rabbits, and I know you care about them. I know you love them. So, but I don't want to be the fall guy for your, saying you're too busy, too much homework. This was to be factored in before we got the rabbits. So I need you to understand that I am going to expect you to do the rabbits to a standard that I'm going to decide. Okay. And if you don't, I'm not going to get into it with you. I'm just going to say you lose your phone privilege for the rest of the evening. Okay, that's it. Like when or you could do the thing where it's like, as soon as you have the rabbit cage done, you can have your phone. Okay, that's it. Get it done. You could have it, and there's no going back and forth. It's very cut and dry. In a sense, you remove yourself from that situation. You say, when you do this, you get that. Okay. Other ways, telling kids that they don't need to do things at all. It's not, because they're depressed or because it's harder for them. And I don't think that that's really helpful. I think it's a really good thing for kids to know that they can be functional. They can contribute to the household. They can do all this, even though they're having a hard time. Because we talk a lot about, building resilience in kids. I like to think about the word robust. I want kids to grow up feeling robust. Like, yeah, I can be depressed. I can be anxious. I could be getting over the breakup with my boyfriend or girlfriend, and I could still get up and take the trash out. I could still do the laundry. I could still feed the pets. It's good to know about oneself, but it's so easy as a parent to say, let me do that for her. Now, of course, if it's really urgent or something, then of course you help your kid out and you do it. But long term, kids get the buy for having a problem, and it's not a good template for them to take out in the world, that they can get away with things by just kind of having a problem. And other times kids are protected from the consequences of their choices. Here's an example for that. Maya, let's say, is very slow in the morning, intentionally slow, because she knows her parents will drive her to school because she's going to miss the bus. So she lollygags around the house, and sure enough, she misses the bus. Oh, I need someone to drive me to school. And the parents drive her to school. And they're resentful and they're angry, and the house is angry because the everyone's yelling at each other. Come on, hurry up, and the girl's yelling at the parent, and the brothers are there. It's like miserable, right? And so what I might suggest is that the parents say, look, Maya, if you were really trying in the morning and really had some difficulty getting ready for school, that's one thing. But I see you on your phone and you're talking to your friends and you're doing this and you know you're going to miss the bus and you just allow it to fall on us to take you to school. And I don't like that. And I've been letting it go because frankly, I just want you to get to school and I need to get to work, but nothing's changing. And I don't like the impact it's having on our relationship. So here's the thing. When it happens and you need a ride from school, it costs me 45 minutes of my time. I will drive you to school, but I'm also going to ask for that time back on the weekends. I'm going to ask you to help me with this chore. I'm going to ask you to help babysit your younger brothers, or I'm going to ask you to volunteer that time to a charity of my choice. Okay. Something like that. Again, it's not just always taking the phone away. You can ask for that for retribution in a different way. And maybe it means something to the kid. Maybe it doesn't. Maybe they'll do it and just get it done, but that's okay. It's not a freebie. The car ride to school is not a freebie, and that can diminish some of the resentment on the part of the parent who feels taken advantage of. Here's the thing. We're really talking about something much larger here. Fundamental to the health of our kids, to the community, to the world, really. And we're talking about citizenship, okay? The obligations that come with belonging to something. We don't talk enough about that. The obligations that come with belonging to having membership in something, membership in a family, membership in a community. When we give up on holding kids accountable for being responsible and playing a role in the sustainability of that group, whatever group we're talking about, we communicate that their compliance is volitional and that their contributions are not essential. And that's not a great message. We want them to know there's really not a choice. You're part of this organization. You're a member of this family. There are obligations that come with membership. And not only do we want you to do that, we need you. We need you to help out because part of the functioning of this family depends on you. That's much better messaging for kids. And I think, in our community, a lot of families are able to provide their kids with a lot of things, good schools and good camps and tutors and good experiences and vacations and stuff. And we want kids to have these things, and we want to stack the deck in favor of reducing stressors for them and giving them all the advantages. And we do that, but when are we asking for anything in return? Okay. Not often enough. And it's not that it's transactional. I'm doing this for you, so I want you to do this for me. It's a citizenship thing. It's your part. And you're part of us. And when we uncouple obligation from belonging, we end up raising children who will feel very entitled, who are self-absorbed. They feel all entitled to all the benefits of membership without being responsible. And I think that is a very dangerous untethering. Okay, dangerous untethering between belonging and obligation. Okay. So let me move on here. I know we started a few minutes late. I'm mindful of the time. Anyway, so talk for a moment about rehabbing, or really, restoring to health the conversations between adults and kids and teenagers. I'm going to go back to the teen narrative, okay? Because besides this American culture narrative saying to us that teens get all blah, blah, blah when they turn, that kids turn, at puberty, kids become like a different person, okay? Unrecognizable. The narrative also says, oh, by the way, kids aren't going to want to talk to you. Just saying. They're not going to want to talk to you. They're not going to want to be with you. That is not true. That is not true at all. It creates this us versus them mentality. And that grows great in a culture where, you're repeatedly told that once your kid reaches puberty, they're not going to want to be with you anymore. They're not going to want to be seen with you. And that's the template. And it entrenches families in conflict for years. Okay. If you're convinced your kid's not going to want to talk to you, then why you're not going to spend a lot of time trying to talk with them. However, the truth of the matter is that most teenagers do want to talk with their parents. They really do. They crave real engagement with their parents. They're just not getting it. There's a real miss here. I sit with these kids all day long, and I will say unequivocally that despite all the talk about kids wanting to individuate or break free from their parents, what they really want is connection. They're starved for it. It's just, and I know many parents want that same thing too. It's just, it's a miss. It's like everybody wants it, and sometimes they try and get it, and then something goes wrong, and everybody kind of retreats back to their corner and licks their wounds. So I want to talk for a little bit about making conversations a little bit better. One of the things that doesn't help is when parents hijack conversations to make a point. We, oh, I only have a couple of years left. I want to make sure she knows this. I want to make sure she knows that. They're going to know that. What matters more is a connection. So here's an example of a 16-year-old boy. Sorry. Yeah, right out of, okay, forgot that one. Right out of my practice, okay? Yeah, I tried to tell my dad about my woodshop class, just wanted to talk to him because he used to have a wood shop in the garage. But it just turned into a lecture about the wood bench I'm supposed to be building for my Eagle project. That's the last time I'll bring up woodshop class. Okay. Happens all the time. Start a conversation, it's great. Parent hijacks it to make a point. You lose the kid doesn't try again. There are other things too that can improve the quality of the conversations we have with our kids. We need to stop asking so many questions. If you think about it, it's only with teenagers that adults, and kids, with kids too, that adults try and jumpstart conversations by asking a lot of questions. We don't do it anywhere else. I mean, with our colleagues, with family, with friends, we'd say, oh my God, I got to tell you about this thing that happened. Or how you doing? Listen, I got to tell you about it. We don't just pummel them with questions. But we do that with kids. It's almost like, I don't know why it changes so much, why we stop at a certain point, or we have anxiety about having conversations with them. Becoming more curious rather than trying to find facts. And most importantly, becoming part of the conversation. Nothing's appealing if it's one-sided. Inviting a kid into an interrogation is going to have a very different result from inviting a kid into a conversation where you show up, you're present, no phone, your eyes are on them. I'll never forget a story about a kid who was so excited to go prom dress shopping with her mom. They were doing it online. And for her, it was this real together event. Mom was on the phone, and the girl even said something to her mom, like, Mom, come on, you're not paying attention. Mom's like, no, I'm paying attention. I'm right here. And she'd look over for a little bit, then she'd go back to her phone. And what was supposed to be this sort of emotionally intimate event became something very different, because if your attention is elsewhere, you're not present. Present is like right there, where front and center, all your attention on the other person. And you know it, you feel it when the other person there. And kids crave that. They want that so bad. The other thing is, over time, kids, I think, learn less and less about their parents. We become unidimensional. They know us as the person who packs the lunch or drives them places or pays for this or, sues them when they're gone. But they're the person of the parent, the multi-dimensional person of the parent. That's what kids want to know too. What matters to you? What doesn't matter? What used to matter that doesn't? What moves you in this world? What makes you cry? What commercials make you cry? What things will you go to the mat for? And I think when we start sharing these in very natural ways in conversations, then they become engaged with us. And it's also a way for them to stay connected with us when they go on their own, because they don't need us. They don't come to us because they need us. They come to us because they enjoy our company, because we're full-fledged people with all of our fullness and all the color in our personality coming forward. And when we can do that, all of a sudden we have a lot less problem starting conversations with kids. Okay. I think if we want to change the conversation we're having with our teenagers, we have to change the conversation we're having about them. When we conceptualize our teenagers and our children differently, then I think we're going to start talking with them differently. And I think then things can begin to change. Okay. The last one is just the idea of rekindling respect and trust and affection. There's one big obstacle that interferes with not only conversation, but relationship building or relationship, quality of the relationships, let's say. And that's resentment and frustration on the part of the parent, okay? Because if you're upset with your kid, if you feel you've been taking the hit for them not being accountable, not being responsible, leaving it all for you, or you doing driving, or feeling like you have no way to influence them, no way to redirect them, that they're not listening to you, it becomes, you can become frustrated, you might become angry, you might become resentful, and that interferes with the quality of the conversation and the relationship you're going to have with them. With anybody, we engage differently with somebody who we're not feeling real swell about, right? We love them, but I don't know, we might avoid talking with them, or we might make little snappy comments, or get a little bit more defensive than usual, or so busy thinking about how we're going to respond to what our kid is saying, we're not even listening to what they're saying. But when parents are successful in holding their kids accountable, the tensions and the resentments decrease, okay? It's a direct relationship. The more you feel like you're holding your kid accountable, they're taking responsibility, you have influence, you're not taking the hit, the more the resentment diminishes. And you're no longer at their mercy. And then when that happens, it just clears the way for healthier conversations and healthier relationships. Defensiveness goes down. Empathy and trust in each other rises. Tolerance and patience for each other rises. Avenues open up for the rehabilitation or the rebuilding of respect among parties. And people become more affectionate with one another. They're freer to be affectionate, verbal or physical or just eye contact. It becomes much more apparent. Okay. And I'm going to end by just saying that every relationship that's jumped between a parent and a child, or a parent and teenager, that's jumped out to me as being like, wow, that's very cool. Like, I love seeing that. I love hearing that. Every single one, the hallmark of it has been respect between the parties, but mutual, going both ways. It's mutual, it's reciprocated, it's given freely, it's given generously. And it's just one of the most important underpinnings of all relationships, but it's the one thing that I find often missing or diminished in relationships in families is the respect piece. So that people are too comfortable the kids are too comfortable being disrespectful. Parents are too comfortable hijacking a conversation to make a point. But when we respect the other, we hold back and we do something for the greater good of I'm building a relationship here. And this is the most important thing, not the point I'm trying to get across. So I'm just going to say to you, don't drink the Kool-Aid that, that all kids and teenagers are fill in the blank, irresponsible, self-absorbed, blah, blah, blah. Parents and children, parents and their teenagers have wonderful, warm relationships. I see it all the time. I have that. They carry it into adulthood. It's possible. And that's why I say that the generation gap everyone talks about is much more apparent than it is a real thing. So with that, I'll wrap up. I want to thank you for joining me. I wish I could see your reactions or faces. I can't. But I will say that thank you. There are a lot of handouts. There's a lot of resources at the rest of the deck. Articles, links to articles. There's an excerpt, how to bolster your resolve if you have trouble holding your kids accountable. There's parenting groups that are formed, talking to teens, other materials. So have at it and see what's useful. And you're welcome to reach out to me with questions now or later. You're welcome to reach out to me. So I don't know, Loretta, do we have time for questions?
We do. If anyone has any questions that they would like to give for Dr. Edgett, now's a great time.
You can call me Janet. I'm real informal with that.
I switch back and forth. I think every other email I sent you was some were Janet, some was Dr. Edgett. This is the second time I think I've heard you speak. It was years ago the first time, and still just as great. So many points.
Thank you.
Felt like you were in my home when my kids were teenagers. A short feedback survey. It's always great for us to get feedback on what you liked, what you would like to see differently. If you have new topics you would like to see addressed in our parent speaker series, that form is a great way to do it. You can click the QR code there. My phone does not like QR codes on screens. So if it's not working for you, we also put the link in the chat. Just a reminder that we have a coalition meeting coming up on October 10th. We would invite anyone to come to that and help us discuss how our community, the greater Westchester area, can build a community where kids thrive. And also our next session is on October 10th. Our next parent speaker series is on October 17th. So you will likely all see an invite for that as well. Thank you to everyone for joining us.